It is your witchy friend Grace from Small Worlds Big Adventures with a little Spooktober announcement. Before our review of the maddening game Arkham Horror, the card game. This week and next week, we will be giving away a game from our personal collection. This week's game is Forbidden Island, a razor-edge cooperative game about hunting for treasures on a sinking island. To qualify, you must live in the United States, comment on at least one video this week, October 15th through the 21st. We will then randomly choose a winner from the comments. Also, everyone who comments throughout the month, the 1st through the 30th, will be entered for a brand new copy of Horrified, a maddening cooperative board game with iconic monsters. We will announce the winner by commenting on one of the person's comments and announce on each Sunday's video who has won. The more videos you comment on, the greater your chance to win, so let us know your thoughts on each game. Hi, I'm Gracie and this is Scott with Small Worlds Big Adventures, and today we are going to be reviewing Arkham Horror, the card game.
Yeah, the card game. Arkham Horror, the card game, is 1 to 2 players if you buy the basic set.
The very basic, yeah.
It scales up to, I think you can play as many as 6 if you've got extra cards to play with. The basic set only comes with enough cards for 2 players. You can buy, I think, an extended set that plays up to 4, and then if you get an extra basic set or expansions, you have enough cards. I think you can play 6. I think they suggest not playing more than that.
Fair.
Game plays in about 60 to 120 minutes. It's going to be a little bit longer your first few games, and it's going to be longer with more players. Cost is $18 on Amazon for the 1 to 2 player.
Yep, the very basic
set,
one,
which is a pretty good price for what you're getting.
Oh,
there.
for sure.
And setup teardown is, we're going to say 10 plus minutes for a couple of reasons. The game has adventures that you've got to set up and get cards out and set up, but also it's a collectible card game.
Yep.
Not a random collectible card game. You don't get booster packs that have random cards in it, but you can set up your own deck, which can take a lot of time depending on how much time you want to put into doing something like that. They do have basic decks set up already if you get the basic thing, and you can just play out of the box, but if you like making your own deck, this is good for that. And that's basically how the game plays. It's a campaigns of connected adventures that you're going to play. Each player chooses a character and they make a deck based around that character. Each character has a class, which allows you to use 2 different types of sets of cards. I believe there are 6 sets in the game currently that you make your deck out of, and that gives you abilities and items to use each turn to try and overcome obstacles as you're moving through locations. There are cards that have different locations. The very first beginner adventure is in a house that's sinking with ghouls coming out of everywhere, and you have like the attic and the hallway and the basement and a couple other rooms that you move around in and do special things.
To kick off our discussion, we are curious if you guys play collectible card games. If you do, what's your favorite one? I know you played Magic for a long time.
I played a bunch of them. Magic, there was Spelljammer, which was a D&D themed one. I've played this. There's a Call of Cthulhu card game that I think is out of print now, which is kind of a fun one-on-one version of Cthulhu. Netrunner is a really fun game. This might be my favorite, although I really like Netrunner a lot too.
I really don't think of myself as having played a lot of collectible card games. So I'm going to say Pokemon, mainly because they're really cute.
Sure, fine.
But when we review games, we do them on a 5-point scale from terrible, bad, mixed, good to excellent. To kick it off, we're going to talk about player agency.
Player agency is good. You're kind of limited to what's in your hand and what you've got on what you've already played, but there's a lot of options in all of that stuff and moving around and fighting monsters and exploring the map and stuff like that. So you've honestly, every turn you've got quite a few things that you get to do. Yeah,
I said good for the same reasons. This will probably come up again, but it gives me very much like tabletop playing feel with the confines of like your actual hand. But mechanics wise, I also said good for the same reasons. Like you have the freedom to move around the house. You have your hand of cards. Rooms have different we'll say, experiences that you respond to. If you play tabletop games or any of the other Arkham games like that, you'll feel very comfortable in this dynamic.
Yeah, challenges, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Thank you.
Each location tends to have some sort of challenge along with it. Yeah, I agree. The mechanics are good. It is an interesting mix between kind of the collectible card game genre and a tabletop board game, in that one, you essentially still have a board that you're moving around in, but also, like a lot of the collectible card games, you have to slowly gather resources to play the cards out of your hand to have them to be able to use. It is an interesting mix, and I'd say the mechanics work pretty well for this. They're complex. It's a complex game.
Yeah,
a lot of these Fantasy Flight Cthulhu games are, but it is a complex game.
Components-wise, I said mixed. It is essentially cards.
Yeah, I did too. A little unfairly, mainly because it's a card game.
Yeah.
And you're playing with cards.
Yeah.
So that's all there is. That being said, the art is excellent.
Always good.
And diverse. Again, Fantasy Flight makes really good Cthulhu, Lovecraftian-based stuff, and their art just gets better and better.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of it for this, because each card has its own picture, like a lot of collectible card games do, and the art on there is very good.
Now, I will say, because sometimes, especially when we're in the mixed realm, $18.
Yeah,
it's real good for $18.
Yeah, again, we only say mixed because we're getting more and more used to games with really good components, and this doesn't have a lot of components. It's just cards.
Yeah.
We're not saying bad.
No.
It doesn't have. Don't expect a bunch of extra bells and whistles. It also does technically have a bunch of cardboard things to keep track of, resources and stuff, which they're fine, but again,
not great. Theming, I said good. I would say, like, of the who makes Fantasy Flight game, Cthulhu games, this is not my favorite one. You still have kind of that feel of being in a Lovecraftian thing. But I think because the campaign builds to bigger stuff, if you just do the first few, you're kind of not in the full immersiveness of the world is ending now.
Yeah.
You get there, but
for instance, one of the chapters in one of the campaigns is literally trying to find a guy at a bar.
Yeah.
Now, shenanigans ensue, but that's all that chapter is. Yeah.
Despite that, I would say, if you are looking to be facing down an elder god, that is maybe not where you're going to start off with this game. But it does feel very much like that early 1900s type of society with the character design, the artwork, and all that. So I said good, but not excellent in my opinion.
Yeah, I said excellent. Counterpoint, if you're only playing half of a campaign, then yes, you've not played the whole story.
That's fair.
It honestly, comparing this to, say, Arkham, the board game, this gets to do some things that the board game kind of can't. And the third edition of the board game does do a pretty good thematic, story base, but this can do a lot more because it's using cards, and it's a little more modular, and it allows it to not take chances, but have mechanics that you would be harder to do in the board game setting without adding a whole bunch of extra components to it. It's when you do a campaign of 6 adventures, it does a pretty good job of feeling kind of like a story slowly unfolding till you get to the final big monster and either face it and win or die or don't. It's for a cardboard game. I think the theming is excellent.
Awesome. Enjoyability wise, I said good. It does hit for me that kind of both love of Lovecraftian mythos and then also tabletop role playing. So I've never walked away from it going, man, that was a waste of time. It's just a good, fun game.
Yeah. I also said good. I think, and you mentioned it, I also like the Arkham Horror board game better. It's a little hard for me to say why. I do enjoy building a deck for this and then getting to see how that plays out. I'd kind of like to see that in a slightly more of a board game setting. This can take a while to set up and then get things going, even compared to the board game, especially if you're going to do more than one chapter at a time. And the chapters tend to play out pretty quick.
They do.
You can pretty easily do 2, maybe 3 in an evening. But my enjoyability for this is good. I do enjoy the game quite a bit.
You kind of touched on it. I will say, like, I'm not a huge deck builder person. I don't love building decks. But having said that, this one I don't mind.
Yeah.
Like, when you're building your deck, it's not as like overwhelming as like Magic the Gathering and stuff like that.
You're limited in your options too, and it not so much guides you, but because you're limited, you don't have as many things that you can put in and not understand. Well, what should I be doing? Yeah.
And a lot of the times you're just swapping for better versions of cards too. Along those lines, I think that this version of Arkham Horror is honestly probably more approachable than either of the board games. So like for new players.
Yeah.
Especially since it's so like story driven, I think it's easier to kind of walk people through that. Also, you're not like, given that it's a campaign, each episode of the campaign, you're not so like, oh God, I'm going to fuck this up.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think it's a little more approachable for new people. Having said that, it's horribly complex. It's not a gateway game.
No, yeah, it's still a Fantasy Flight Arkham game. So it's still complex. Yeah.
The simple components means that like this is much more of a theater of a mind game. You don't really have standees, or anything like that, and even like the locations, it's not like you have a board set out. It's more like card descriptions.
Yeah.
But having said that, like if you like theater of mind, if you like tabletop role playing and D&D, like this might be a really good fusion for you.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. One, I like that there are different campaigns for this that are kind of wildly thematically different from each other. It almost like what you said, it does feel kind of like a tabletop role playing game in that sense. The game is expandable. There's a lot of expansions to it with different, both different campaigns and then also a handful of one-off adventures that you can play. All of them add new cards to, or potential cards anyways, to the deck that you're building, but also have an adventure with monsters and places. It scales pretty good with players. I don't know if I'd play it with more than 4, but it scales up. You can play it with 1, all right. That'd be a little hard because it can be tricky, but 2 works pretty good, and it scales well to 3 and 4.
Yeah. And I think we have played it at like 2, 3, and 4, and I wouldn't like choose one number over the other.
No.
So now, of course, it's Arkham Horror. So if you like the H.P. Lovecraft mythos, you're probably going to like this game. If you like deck building games like Magic the Gathering, this is probably going to appeal to you. And then Pathfinder, the adventure card game, plays very similarly.
Yeah. We had that and played it a bunch. Similar thing. It's a campaign of adventures, and you're building your decks for your individual characters to play through. And if you like that, you'll like this.
Yeah. If you found our review engaging, you can go ahead and hit that like button. If you want to hear more game reviews, tabletop tips, DIYs, you can go ahead and hit subscribe. And if you hit the notification bell, the next time we upload, you'll be notified. But if there's nothing else, see you next time.